effects. And I'll just go to new composition, just like before. Okay. All right, so we're back to where we were, square one, zeroed out, new composition, new project. But what I wanted to talk about here was, I want to talk about like when you bring in an asset, an element, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, you know, and I want to talk about the embedded scripting language that is in After Effects. Now, this makes a difference though, whether it's text, it's a logo, it's a JPEG, it's a PNG. I could do this with anything, okay? But one thing I may want to just make sure here is that my anchor point is dead center rather than offset. All right. And I've talked about these before. And you can see when I have something selected here, especially the effects presets or something, go ahead and reset my workspace. Let's go with default, okay? And talk about these effects presets. Now, I've shown you already some of these animation presets for animating text and everything, or transform, or we could even type in ones. And I'm going to type in the one called Wiggle. And the Wiggle, or Wigglerama, or you can see Wiggle Gelatin, Wiggle Position, Wiggle Rotation. What Wiggle is Adobe After Effects scripting language for random, meaning these will give us random elements. So let's just go with something that's easy to understand here, like Wiggle Rotation. So that if I were to drag one of these pre-made effects on here, you're going to see over here now, Wiggle Speed, Wiggle Amount, Transform, blah, blah, blah. If I hit the space button here, you see that this is now going to randomly rotate. See that? It's just randomly rotating automatically based on amount and speed. In fact, let me go up here to my preview and deactivate full screen. Okay. Now, if I want more wiggle, I can increase the speed. If I want more or less amount of degrees, I can get less rotation. Now, what is making this happen? And you see how we get that to kind of act. So you think, again, when you see a lot of text animated, maybe it's a kinetic type, maybe it's an opening title, maybe it's, you know, something, especially if I activate my blur. You can see where I can get some pretty cool effect there of just random movement of rotation only using a wiggle. Now, what is wiggle going to do? Well, what wiggle is doing, you can see that these things have turned red. Anchor point, position, and rotation. When things turn red, it means that they're being controlled by a script. See? So even if I open up my text, I give myself a little more space here. Okay. When I go into the text, effects, wiggle rotation, you see how they're red. Now, what that represents is a script. And if I were to open up that, you can see what's driving the anchor point is a script called anchor point. What's driving the position is a script called anchor point. What's driving the rotation is a script called wiggle, effect, rotation, speed. So what you can do is you can reverse engineer now some of this element of the word wiggle being random is basically affecting the rotation, and it's giving us these parameters of creating these custom kind of controllers. Now, that could be a little bit difficult to kind of grasp off the top if you've never done any kind of scripting languages or programming or anything like that, or this is how everything is built in computers, right? Is you write a code that gives you these elements, and each of these are controlling these down here. Now let's go backwards a little bit, okay? And I'm just going to do something really simple here, okay? Layer, new, null object. Now what is a null? A null is just an empty controller with nothing visual. Nothing visual to see here. Now I can change the anchor point, but I'm going to leave the anchor point right there on this null. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to control and create a script to have this randomly move on the position, Okay? And to do that, I'm going to hold it. Let me see if I can do this. I hold Control, and I key the stopwatch for position. No, it must be Alt. There it is, Alt. Alt, click the key, and it basically turns it red. That says now that the position of this null is currently a transform dot position. But what if I said wiggle, okay, and then gave it some values? We'll say 100, 100. Now what that means is that I'm writing a simple code that this null is going to wiggle 100 units in the X and 100 units in the Y randomly. It does. Spacebar. Now, of course, it's a null, so we can't see anything. So let me just go ahead here. I'll make a little solid. Okay? And that solid, I'm just going to mask off with an ellipse. So it's just a little red solid here. Okay, let me go ahead and put that currently beneath my null so I can see my null. So I can then center it up to my null. And I'm just going to parent that to the null. Okay? So that that red circle, that solid, is now going to be the visible version of that null. I hit the space bar and you see it is randomly moving in the X and the Y using the null's scripted wiggle position, which looks even better if we add blur to it. Okay? Kind of cool stuff. Now, what happens if I go into that null and I change that to an even greater number? 200, 200. Now you're going to see it's even more. Now, and this might be a good case to deactivate blur. But you see now it's even moving in a more random kind of way. What happens if I move these numbers quite low? Say 205. Yeah? So what we're learning here is its percentage and distance. Let's go in and try and see. So what it's telling us here is the first number is the speed, I guess, and the second number is the location. But that quickly now, I can get random movements, which gives me more natural kind of random kind of. So you can imagine some of these cool effects that are out there, like a flying, a fly, or something randomly moving like this, or camera shake even can be done. And that's not using the pre-made effect of wiggle, but actually applying it myself. Okay. That red solid now. Go back to the beginning. Okay. Now, what if I'm going to go with a black solid now because I'm going to use blending mode. Okay. And what I'm going to do with this black solid now is put on an effect called, let's see here, where's that? I'm looking for the lens flare, which is generate lens flare. Now you see what lens flare does is it gives me this flare center locator, right? Now what if I put that flare center locator right over top of that anchor point of my null? My null is here. Let's go ahead and do a blending mode so we can see through our block. There should be an add. Black see-through. I guess I need to have something in the background temporarily. Hold on a second. Let's just toss something in the background. I just want a picture so I can see through it. Good enough. Now let's go to the black solid, and I'm trying to hide the black, which I think is an add. There we go. Okay. But what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to take that flare center. Okay, remember the flare center, which is right there, and I have it over top of the anchor point of the null. Watch what I'm going to do. Instead of parenting the black solid to the null that has that wiggle on it, I'm going to take flare center right here. Move this up out of the way so we can see it all. There we go. See, flare center value, parent it to the position. So what that is saying is that, you see now the flare center is going to mimic the position of the null, so that wherever that random movement is now is going to affect, see, that lens flare position. What me now is I just need to turn down my speed stick. Oops. There we go. That's what I'm after. I'm going to turn down the speed, and we get a pretty cool effect. And because I told the blending mode, the black is actually see-through if I were to put this over a background image. I'm just going to leave it alone right now. So I'm not done yet. Watch this. Layer, new, solid. Okay, I'm going to leave it be black. And this time around, go ahead and once again do an add. See, so it's see-through. But this time around, I'm actually going to do a simulation of that particle system. Okay? Now, I need to think about what is the, okay, how do I want this to have jet sideways, directional. Let's go with direction. Let's go with velocity down to a very low number. Inherent velocity, I'll turn that up a little bit. Just start with a small number like 1. And I'm going to change this particle type from line. I'll go to star. And make these guys quite small when they start. Quite small when they die. Maybe give it a lifespan. A little less. And maybe the birth rate to a lower number like 3 instead of 4. But this also now gives me, okay, this particle, you see, gives me a locator. Well, what if I go here and parent that locator, or overlay that locator right over top of not only the lens flare, but of the null? Now I can come here and you see producer. So producer gives me a position as well with a parent. What am I going to do? I'm going to parent that to the scripted wiggle position as well. So that what I'm basically saying now is that the particle producer is going to follow, is parented to the null random movement, just like the lens flare. The thing I might want to do is just swap these so my lens flare is on top. There we go. And watch how cool this is when I get this first one. So now you can see some of those things like inherent velocity and that random movement of the particles. I mean, if I come down here and I even start playing with these particles, even less, like, okay, let's give it less producers, less lifespan. See that? Less velocity, direction, resistance, all these things will give me different, or faded sphere. How about that? So I can create almost like a meteor effect or an asteroid. Let's give it more velocity. There we go. Okay. So you can create quite a cool kind of, you know, effect. Add more lifespan to it. There we go. Producer, more lifespan. See? And And so it just gives you, I love that random movement. All effects really need randomness. The second we start playing around with it with our, with our keyframing, we really lose quite a little of natural movement to it all. Even add some blur. Okay. We could change the colors out and say, yeah, I'll go from yellow. Let's go from yellow to purple or something really cool. See that? And that could be any of these, lines. You see what lines look like: shaded sphere, faded sphere, shaded and faded, just different effects here. Even here you get motion polygon, quad polygon, cubes. Okay? Now you got basic cubes kind of going out there that you can play around with. But the neat part of all this is that you get this natural kind of movement to everything that is just a cool effect. And all that's controlling it is, all the animation is right here. Everything else is parented. It's increasing. Now, if I wanted this tail to fly in a different way, well, I would play around with, again, the particle emissions using gravity and everything else. Okay. So go to negative gravity. Now it's coming from the top. Now there's so much gravity that it's just pulling it upwards. If I play around again with the speed of my wiggle, say these are sensitive though, just from 1 to 2. Now it's going to increase the speed. Okay. And now that inherent velocity is even more important because it's moving so fast. So the cool part about this, if you want if you want to give the illusion of like a random spotlight that's moving randomly, you could put in a script for wiggle or use the pre-made wiggles. I just think this is really neat when you can just play with position like this and get a neat effect. Oh, that's pretty cool. Look at that. Now it's just disappearing with 0 gravity. That is a pretty neat effect. Okay. And because these are wiggles, this is really cool here. Watch this. New composition. Okay. Let's go ahead and bring the first composition in, which is a wiggle. Then duplicate it, and believe it or not, all I got to do here, oh no, it's going to mimic, that's right. Yeah, I'd have to do it, this is getting a little complicated. Hold on, let's get this. I have to do it here. But these 3 are active and working. If I duplicate those and parent them, so if I null 1, right? Maybe do it 1 at a time. I'll hit Control D to duplicate. Let's call this specifically null 2 so we can separate it. Let's take this, duplicate it. Okay, but remember now, this one needs to be parented to null 2 now, because the script will be different. So I come here to the producer, position, make sure we parent it to this null 2. And now that means I need to go to this one, duplicate it, and take this null, which is the lens flare center parent, to the new null 2. So I'm duplicating these all, but reconnecting the parent. So that now I'm going to get 2 of these behaving independent of each other. So it starts to give that really cool effect, almost like the Death Eaters in Harry Potter when they were flying randomly, through the sky. And honestly, what I need to do to really make this kind of work is even just apply a little filter like a Gaussian blur to soften this cube or whatever that this particle type is. Or, watch this. Go to comp 2 now. Let's get comp 1 into comp 2. So now it's just a nested version of it all. Cool effects. There's so many neat ones out here. Let's do stylize roughen edges. And this will roughen. Now see, it wants to roughen the edges of, it wants to roughen the edges of the black. So this is where this roughen edge isn't going to work on this layer. Rather back here on the layer that's got the particles. So if I just paste Command V, see, that's now roughened up that particle. Let's go with something like spiky. Let's go to something like stretch width, like that, to stretch it. It's going to cycle, maybe make it more complex. Sharpness, increase that. Okay, now I'm going to take this one, Command C and copy it. And find this particle, which I will paste and get that one to be spiky. So then we come over here and we see the new result. Now we're getting this kind of spiky, rough and edged version of those two particles, two lens flares, two nulls behaving independent of each other. So if I wanted to really get interesting here, I could come here and say, yeah, well, let's identify them. So one will be yellow to purple, and the other one will be green to blue. And now we'll actually be able to identify the two different particles. So motion graphics is more than just, moving stuff to do an advertisement or a broadcast graphic. You can build effects very, very quickly and rapidly in this. Now see, I'm looking at this, maybe I'm not as keen to that. So I can come back here and I can just say, yeah, take it back off. Is the lens flare too bright? You can always remove that. And remember as well, it's whatever background I put, because I can still make this black value here be see-through with a blending mode. So only the colors and the light show up. So I could bring in a logo, and I could do with the logo and parent it to that null as well. So now I have the logo leading the way there. I could have a little rocket ship that basically, is animating, and as it's animating around, or I could have a little green screen. I could have somebody on green screen filmed with like little fairy wings flapping and key out the green, and then basically put them and parent them to that null. So as they're flying around, they're giving off this little, they're flying around in space, and they've got this little pixie dust and this glow around them. Just some neat stuff. I'm not done with this yet, okay, because I still want to mess around with this. Okay, so I've got this kind of going on here. And there's other stuff we can keep going. I could apply other effects. Stylize Simulations. Let's see here. Where's a good one here? CC Kaleido. And this is exactly what it is. It is a kaleidoscope effect. Okay. Now again, this might work for maybe like an ad for some kind of Fruitopia, or the backdrop to some like hippie DJ or something like that, but it's basically like an animated mandala, and all it's doing is just playing around with the kaleidoscope of, see, if I just do a simple flip-flop, it's going to basically give me just a flip-flop version of, let's increase the size, of what we're looking at. Okay? So it's just kind of repeating that. Flip-flop's pretty simple. A flower starts to work in 360. again, this looks like it took hours to build fractal animation, but it's not. It's scripting language, and yes, this is getting into the fractals here. So just some neat ways to kind of work, especially when we're dealing with light against a black background like this. And you could do this with even video, right? For example, if I were to just, whoops, do that, project folder here, import, and let's see here, here's the video I just rendered, Trapeze 3D. So let's just assume that this is going to be a video that's here. I can come here, play around with blending modes. That. And you can get, you know, playing around with just layering all this stuff. Or what if I just paste Kaleidoscope now? See, so now I've pasted the Kaleidoscope onto the video. See? And now you look at that. We've got the trapeze girl swinging in there using the Stylize. Play around with the evolution of this, the size, the rotation. Just different cool effects here working with these Kaleidoscope filters, which I've always found them pretty neat, fascinating. As a way of filtering and creating some neat content. And you see people do this a lot in music videos. You see them do this a lot in opening titles. You know, the James Bond titles use a lot of Kaleidoscope effects. Okay, because you could even come in here now, which is really neat, key the rotation. Now we're going to rotate the image while it's kaleidoscoping. Kind of inceptionary. So just unlimited ways of kind of distorting and animating, playing with content, whether it's these simple effects or these more complex. I mean, that just looks really neat, and that's just animating the rotation now of the Stylize of the video of the chick on the trapeze. You can add over top, other stuff. All kinds of stuff going on here. Gimmicky, yes, but cool nonetheless. And it takes nothing. Just throw in some, I could just keyframe and animate or grab video of my cat and do a kaleidoscope to it. As long as I have bright lights and all that stuff, you can get some pretty neat effects. Just don't stare at it too long. You'll end up joining a cult in India or something like that. But for the most part, like I said, pretty neat stuff involved here when it comes to playing around with some of these more advanced effects, or not even advanced, just other effects that are out there besides just the obvious of keyframing and movements and stuff like that. Maybe next week I'll talk a little bit about using, I could talk about Mocha. That's another plugin that's built in here for like tracking, planar tracking and rotoscoping. Very cool plugin that comes with After Effects. I'll talk about, some keying maybe next week of working with the key light or for green screen and so on. If you want to use that, it's usually, those are more advanced classes as you get deeper into the After Effects and or Premiere. But again, pretty cool. I mean, I think that's just neat little effect stuff that we're getting to here. In a nutshell, that's why I wanted to talk about this whole idea of scripting and how to program and script and what that, when you see these examples of red, what they basically represent, you know, as far as a speed and an amount of wiggle. So I just made that blue-green one much faster, so it's shooting all over the place. And I can have, like I said, I don't really have any motion blur on it because there's nothing set for blur yet. But I think that's pretty gosh darn cool as a neat, quick effect kind of to create. Oh, and by the way, don't forget too, we can talk about this lens flare being different types of lens flares, you know, or it could be any thing, shape, whatever you want. You know, you can play around with even the brightness and say, yeah, well, I don't want it so bright. I just want it to be a nice white dot. Now, there actually is the Harry Potter Luminous tutorial that these guys, Cinecom, do in their YouTube channel, where they use the lens flare and particles to kind of create that Harry Potter with a simple tracker with a null. And then they keyframe with a black lens flare. And they even have video where they add light, and then as he, you know, does his luminous, it turns on, and then he moves his wand around and you get these little particles. So there are tutorials out there in doing that kind of visual effect kind of thing. So in a nutshell, I'm actually kind of liking that. I'm just come here and add that to the encoder as well. I sometimes like to put these videos at the beginning just to kind of show what we're doing. Waiting. There it is. Match source H.264. Make sure it doesn't know where to save it. So I'll just call this. Whatever. There's something out here, so I just put the word code. Now, whatever you want to do with this, of any parameter, I mean, this could be an effect parameter, this could be a pre-made effect, this could even be, if I go into text, watch this, and path options. Well, let's go into more options here, but any value, like this, which, what does that do? I don't know if that does anything. Well, here, I can add and animate here for fill color RGB. See? So even here with the fill color RGB, all I need to do is hold Alt and click on the stopwatch, the little stopwatch kind of keyer, right? That now gives me the element here of putting in a script. So here it's basically fill color, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So if I were to come here and say wiggle, just using the basic wiggle scripter here, and then give it a value, 2,200. I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen.
And you open that up by pressing what? The
Alt and
Alt?
click, hold an Alt and click on the little stopwatch here next to what you want to do.
All right, so it's Alt and then click.
And then it gives me suggestions for what code is already controlling that. I just removed those and typed in wiggle and then a value. And you see now, as I scrub through, I am randomly grabbing a color using these variables. So the first one is speed. So if I were to do something quite large there, and then the second one is variables, you know, of value. Now when I hit the space bar, I'm going to get this, see, just random colors popping up, controlled by this random wiggle script. Now to remove it, I could Alt and click and it takes it away. See? So any variable here, let's go into transform here. Let's Alt and click rotation. See? Now I can type in, I'm only talking about the wiggle one right now just because it's the most obvious to see. And I want this rotation to be really fast, 25, comma, but very small amounts, 2 degrees. Okay. Now, if I rewind, and I'm going to actually hit motion blur because this is going to be pretty cool. It's going to rotate randomly, but very, very fast, but not a lot of distance. See, it's only rotating very, very small amount. See? The code, and let's increase it. So I'll say, I don't know, let's say 250 and 20 degrees. Now, you see how you get that kind of, and you see that a lot on like opening titles, especially for horror films or something like that. They'll have something like this doing its thing, but then what they'll do is they'll take the text, and they'll duplicate it, and they'll make this one be not blurry, but have different scripted amounts. So instead of that fast, maybe it's much slower. So you end up with a blurry one kind of fluttering behind it, while the top one, maybe that top one's just a little too, hold on. Too much opacity. There we go, see? So it almost like, you get that, almost like the Matrix, right? Where something's moving so quickly and you see it in like glimpses, but yet you're getting that crazy blur behind it. Movie 7, I think, does that for the opening titles, where you're getting this kind of jump, shaky kind of text. So, I just think it's a pretty cool kind of effect that you could do there with these scripting. And that's anything you bring in, right? If I were to bring in a video or something like that, or bring in, where's the trapeze girl, right? Okay, so there she is. She's this trapeze girl. Well, any value she's got, any parameter here, opacity, rotation, scale, just hold Alt and click on the stopwatch, right, here. This opens it up, and then I can, even here, you see by typing here, it gives me the code for After Effects. See, to local lowercase, throws, wiggles, widths, set stroke, skew. I don't know. Let's try one of these. Skew. 4,400. I have no idea what it's going to do. Oh, and it says the project contains expression error, so it doesn't understand that. Okay, so yeah, skew is not defined. So I don't know what the parameters on how to type skew, but you know, wiggles per second, temporal wiggle, and it kind of gives you like a shortcut there of, let's try 5 and 400 on that. On the scale, and you see now she is going to randomly scale. See? Now, if I were to unlock it beforehand, I can then lock and control it. And you can see even here, expression scale, which is, again, a enable. So if I disable or enable a script, I can slow post expression script. I can pick whip script. And here is my expression language. So you can see here all the different elements of scripting inside of Gaussian random. Let's do random 2, 200. Is that going to do the same thing as wiggle? No, it actually gave me an error. The project contains expression result must be dimension 2, not 1. Which I guess is no. Dimension 2. I guess if you look up some of the cheats or some of the help for writing scripts, it'll tell you variables that you need to put in here, because some of these are 1 variable, some of these are 2 variables, see, meaning just 1 variable instead of 2. Some will be 3. So you have to do 3 numbers here, like 200, 5, 150. You could also do negative variables sometimes. I don't know what exactly that error is giving me, because I never really used random. I usually use the wiggle there instead. And again, you even see it gives me an alert here, or I can Alt and click and deactivate it and get it back to normal. So lots of cool potential here with the script.